Symposium 2021. I want to first introduce myself, Ernest Stewart, architect, principal with Kimberly Stewart in the leadership of Stewart Architecture, Orange County and regional architect, and also chairman, proudly a chairman of the project delivery Knowledge Committee. And I just wanted to explain a little bit about the Knowledge Committee. It's actually, we were inspired by the development of project delivery and architecture by the National Committee, who hosts annual symposiums and who also inspired us to have local symposiums that share and look into and explore and amplify some of the subjects that are really vital to our profession and the professions related to us in construction and project delivery. So as a chairman, I've taken the position now today of being a co-moderator with Ron Everly, who I'll introduce in a minute. And the pattern that we're going to follow now is that we'll be introducing each of the panelists as we move into the actual symposium. I've lost my voice, so Ron and I will be co-moderating today, and when I say take it away, Ron, that means that he's taking the floor and I'm taking a drink of tea. And we've just the past hour, this group of incredible panelists and I have been in conversation in an informal way, just continuing to explore the subject of how the events of 2020 are shaping project delivery to their specific profession, their specific work, and their specific company that they're working with. So at this point, I'd like to introduce each one of them, starting not alphabetically, but with an organization that I kind of set up. Aaron Locke is with Woodbridge Capital Partners, Development and Management. In a moment, he'll introduce himself, but I just wanted to share with you the name, his individual name, and you can see him now on the screen. You can see his name there on the screen. And the next one that I'd like to introduce is John Denyon, AIA President of Denyon Associates, Architecture and Planning. The next on our list is Ray Boff, who is with DPR Construction Manager of Prefabrication and Modular Manufacturing. Next is Luis Escobel with Hensel Phelps, and his position is advancing project delivery with virtual design and construction, an area that I'm very, very interested in and participate in many of the projects that we deliver. Next is Dr. Sam Noor, PhD, who's president of Absolute Consulting Engineers, and the list of engineering capabilities that STOM carries and maintains and manages is as long as my arm. And Scott Davis, representing Autodesk, and Scott is a technical director with Autodesk, an old friend and associate and mentor of our company. I know each one of the panelists personally and individually, and I am so pleased to be in the same room with these gentlemen and to share knowledge, information, and value in the conversation moving forward. So each one of them now has 2 minutes to introduce themselves and their company and their focus, their perspective, their individual perspective on this subject, how the events of 2020 are shaping project delivery in 2021 and in the future, and specifically the work of their profession and their company. So Aaron, take it away.
Thank you, Ernest. Aaron Locke, Woodridge Capital Partners, the VP of Development here. Woodridge Capital Partners concentrates on a lot of hospitality assets, but we also touch, we say we're opportunistic in that we touch any asset class that really fits our investment profile. So we work in condominiums, multifamily housing, we've touched student housing, even industrial, retail, you name it, we've kind of touched it. Mostly bi-coastal, so we have some stuff on the East Coast as well as West Coast here in California. Sporadically some stuff in Texas as well as in Hawaii as well. Myself, I manage a portfolio of projects in excess of about $1 billion worth of real estate. I essentially lead the project from soup to nuts, so I'm working on the acquisitions team, the initial underwriting, due diligence, zoning analysis. I hire the team. I help kind of push the project through the entitlements, carry it through all the way through the A&E process to construction, and then I can carry it through construction all the way to completion, whether that's sale of units or sale of the complete asset or lease up of the asset. That's what I do here. And then my background, licensed architect, studied architecture, Cal Poly Pomona, went to Harvard University to study real estate before moving back to California, my home state.
Aaron, thank you very much. I think I'm back off of mute here, and the next, just one personal comment is that Aaron and Kimberly and I have known each other for many years. We've watched Aaron grow professionally and in his career, and are very proud and pleased to see his leadership in his industry and profession of choice. Our next panelist to be introduced today is John Denyon. And please, John, take it away.
Thank you, Ernest. Hi, I'm John Denyon with Denyon Associates, Architecture and Planning. Our home office is here in Irvine, California. We have another office in Nashville, Tennessee, and Shanghai, China. Our office specializes in residential architecture, everything from custom homes to production homes, multifamily, anything residential we design. We are licensed in 44 states here in the United States, and we've done work in 15 countries. Overall perspective, when you work in multiple markets, it's really important to understand those markets, understand the living behaviors of your market. And so that's what we have a great focus on.
John, thank you very much. And you stayed inside the 2 minutes, and thank you
I tried.
for that. But I just wanted to say one thing, and that's that I'm just looking at the array of panelists that are gathered together here this afternoon. And I can't express how pleased I am to be in the same room with each and every one of you. So Ray Boff, please take it away. You've got the floor.
Perfect. Well, thank you everybody for having me. Really excited to be here to talk to this group of people. It's been great getting to know everybody along the way too. My name is Ray Boff. I'm a DPR Construction's national prefab leader. DPR focuses on advanced tech, life science, commercial, higher ed and healthcare core markets. And my responsibility, though, is to drive prefab strategy for our 9,000 employees with 30 offices around the U.S. and then a few that are overseas now. My background, I started as an architecture major at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. I think I jumped the tracks, went over to the construction management department, where I ended up getting my my project management degree or construction management degree. I've been in Orange County for a little over 2 years now, but prior to that, I was up in the San Francisco Bay Area, responsible for a manufacturing vertical for a real estate developer up there, but specializing in modular manufacturing and high density projects. So a lot of fun experience there on all different tiers of the prefab pyramid, which we'll gladly go through a little later. But we're heavily focused now on productizing the built environment and being smarter about how we plan and build our projects.
Planning and building the projects leads us right straight over to Luis Escobel, who's got his boots on planning and delivering projects under construction. Take it away, Luis.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Luis Escobel. I'm a senior VDC manager for Hensel Phelps here in Southern California. Similar to Ray's story, I started off as an architect major out at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Then, through the course of my years, made the switch to CM, graduate with my degree in construction management. And then I've been working with Hensel Phelps since 2008. So my role here with the company is just overseeing anything BIM BDC related. Obviously that goes beyond just the 3D modeling kind of portion of it. Now it's just anything technology related. I know Scott can kind of attest to just how broad the VDC world is now, beyond just 3D coordination and whatnot. So, leveraging a lot of different tools, new technology, drones, laser scanning, just the whole gamut of everything as far as what we do. So my role out here with Hensel Phelps is just making sure that our projects have what they need to build, in a sense. A lot of our work here in the Southern California region is heavily design build, designed assist. So for me, my role is engaging with the design teams, the engineers, pretty much everyone very early on to make sure that we're all working, towards the same goal as far as delivering a really good project at the end to the owner, and just finding new ways to incorporate technology and just, at the end, turn over something that they have that if, 5-10 years down the road, they needed to, either retrofit, remodel, whatever it may be. They have all that information more now in this digital environment where they're not pulling, a bunch of different plan sheets with just markings and whatnot. So that's my role here. And that's what I hope to bring to this panel discussion.
Luis, thank you very much. And you've just touched on the subject that Scott is so familiar with, and that's the major game changer that's occurred with the virtual design and construction world that we live in now. So Scott, please introduce yourself and take it away.
Very much, Ernest. Pleasure to be here. I'm honored that you guys asked me to be part of this panel. My name is Scott Davis. I'm one of our senior AEC technical specialists at Autodesk. I started my career in architecture in 1988 in high school on a drafting board. Quickly took up AutoCAD 9 for any of you old timers that go back in the old AutoCAD days. And then got my degree in architecture from Cal Poly Pomona here in Southern California, where I live. My home is currently in Chino, California. So I graduated from Cal Poly, went to work at Fluor Daniel, now Fluor Corporation, was a CAD manager there, wrote Lisp routines, got into programming, the programming side of things. I think I was starting to tend towards the technical side of my career. Then I spent 8 years at a firm in Southern California called WLC Architects, where I learned about this probably revolutionary now piece of software prior to it actually ever coming to market. So this piece of software called Revit, it is now kind of the key around building information modeling. I learned about Revit pre-release, started to use it, introduced it to my firm at WLC, which led me to my career now as this technical specialist at Autodesk, which really takes me up and down the western half of the US and Western Canada, visiting customers like you guys, and really talking about technology. So I often say that I'm a recovering architect. Some of you guys went into construction management and other avenues from architecture. I went into pure technology and went to work for a software company, but enjoy what I do. And I think my part of contributing to this conversation today is that technology side. And what happened in a pandemic or in a situation like this? What tools became available to allow people to work differently, work remotely, work from home? And I think we'll get into that more as the panel discussion moves on today.
Scott, thank you very much. And you just touched on the key phrase that has impacted our lives hugely in the last 21 years, and that's the phrase Revit, the game changer. And that term, that concept, that software, and those capabilities connected with that brought Aaron and Kimberly and I together many years ago. So Aaron, I've got a question for you that's going to be shared with each of the panelists today. And that is truly how the events of 2020 shaped the work of your company.
Sure. And
2021 and beyond.
Aaron, before you start, I think, did we miss some? No.
Some, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Yep.
Now, Sam, you're on mute.
Yes, Sam is
Sam's
muted.
on mute. Ron?
He always keeps
Thank you
the
so
best for the
much.
last. So I'll leave it at that. So my name is Sam Noor. I am a degree nuclear engineer, and after Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, I technically became homeless, had to find another venue to make a living and pay my rent. I ended up getting my first mechanical PE, and then electrical, then structural. I am now licensed in 32 states. I am very active with USC, primarily teaching the ARE exams. I am very active with AIA Orange County. I do have a blog that I simply put my thoughts together, and every lecture that I give is free and is online. So whether it's ARE or any other subject, and I've written quite a number of elements from LEED and green concepts, et cetera, they're all there, free for taking. Primary issue is I am very active in the code bodies. I do litigations, and my most recent adventure was writing a 27-page critique of ICC's IPC, International Plumbing Code, and I wrote it for the IAPMO, for the Uniform Plumbing Code. It is on this month's interview that they had with me. So it's on page 24 of their magazine. But in any case, I am ready to rumble and respond to this discussion that we have. Thank you.
Sam, thank you very much. Again, my sincere apologies for jumping forward and not staying on track. So as we move forward, we'll circle back now to the primary question and ask Aaron, who's the first panelist to respond, how the events of 2020 have been shaping the work of your company in 2021 and into the future.
I was trying to think of the most apt quote, and I think the best one I could find to think of was, there are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. That was Lenin, actually. I think we had that last year with COVID. And if you follow like tech, which I'm sure Scott can attribute to this point, is that you have something called disruptive innovation, and you have kind of an absorption scale in terms of your customer base. And what we saw is through kind of this black swan event, everyone had to scramble to adopt technology that they weren't prepared to adopt for another like decade. So you get things like Zoom, and you get things like BIM 360, whose user base just skyrockets. So when this happened, I've worked with a lot of architects and I'm an architect myself, and I know how important it is to be in front of people when you're designing and collaborating. And my first thought was like, if they're going to close the offices, like, how are my architects going to deliver anything? And so it was like, a random Tuesday or something in April or May, and the offices were closing in New York, and, we're on a conference call, and it's like, well, what are we going to do? And they said, oh, it's not a problem. We can be working remotely in about 2 days. And I'm like, what? And they're like, no, yeah, we're going to have our entire office of 100 architects working remotely in like 2 days. And it's just like, I'm flabbergasted. And I'm like, okay, we're going to see a complete drop in productivity, and there's going to be miscommunications. And I was like pleasantly surprised that it might have even increased in terms of productivity. That our meetings were held at the same exact times. There was no change, and in fact, I think the productivity might have increased in terms of like communication, like tools like Zoom or like Bluebeam combined with Zoom. So there's like direct collaboration in real time. It didn't really affect the delivery process for us in the way that we kind of anticipated. So from an owner standpoint, we expected the world to kind of fall apart, but in fact, it just adopted technology that it would have adopted 10 years from now anyways.
Thank you very much for that response, Aaron. And I'll just make a note that you are one of the individuals who continued to go to work every day on the 22nd floor of a high-rise building in Century City that was basically an empty building now. It's
easy to quarantine when the entire building is vacant. So
the entire building was vacant. You got on the elevator anyway. And engaged in those meetings with the architects in New York. So congratulations. John.
To follow up with Aaron, I mean, from the architect's perspective, not to mention technology, I think we all saw the advancement in technology through Zoom. It's a technology that we're going to continue using with our clients. I mean, we like I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of work out of state, and it's been great to be able to have these face-to-face, being able to share your screen and do all that. So I'm sure that's benefited all of us. But one thing that we took advantage of this situation, and I think it was Rahm Emanuel who had some quote about don't let a crisis go to waste. And so we took that attitude and basically created some prototypes. We actually surveyed all of our clients as a way of doing an outreach to our clients, and we went on social media, and we just asked some general questions about what does the home of the future look like now that we're in quarantine. And we just got an amazing response from a lot of clients, a lot of consumers, and we took that information, synthesized it in some really great ideas that we're actually starting to use in our projects now. And just to use just a couple examples, back in was it 1917, the Spanish flu, a lot of the things you see in homes today actually derive from the Spanish flu. Powder rooms, for instance, that was something that was created during that time because people didn't want the milkman coming in their home. They could easily just come in, wash their hands, and move on. The whole notion of closets. Before that, we had armoires, and in the 20s, we decided to eliminate a lot of dust and clutter because of the Spanish flu. So those ideas have actually continued on in today's architecture, and there's some great ideas out there that we're experimenting with that we're actually implementing in our designs today. So again, that was something that really benefited us, and I think we're able to move that and be able to serve our clients better by some just new, fresh ideas. Lastly, too, I think it's important to note that working remotely was difficult, and for us, we have a very tight culture here at Denyon Associates, and so trying to discover what does a remote culture look like, and we worked really hard to continue that culture, and I think we successfully did it using Zoom, having our Monday meetings with the whole staff. And as a result, as people started coming back to the office, and we returned everyone back in our office in May, I think our culture is stronger today than it was prior to the pandemic. So there's been a lot of benefits because of COVID and the pandemic.
John, thank you very much for the insights and the message that you shared. These are some things that I certainly didn't know, and other panelists weren't aware of. The inside knowledge of how you were able to continue an operation and take advantage of a crisis. Well done and well spoken.
I do what you got to do, right?
The next panelist that I wanted to ask that same question to is Ray Boff. And the question again is, within your company, when 2020 occurred, what were the shaping activities with your work and with your industry and with your profession that occurred, taking you forward into the future?
Sure. I think there were some benefits that came out of this. Obviously, we could nail each other down and be more accessible, which really helped. Unfortunately, probably like all of us in the call, our calendars quickly piled up with never-ending Zoom calls, but that was okay. We had this, virtual workforce that really forced us to communicate more effectively. VDC has always been kind of a backbone of what DPR has done, but we really had an opportunity to enhance, how we communicate, how we coordinate, and then how we, integrate our models as well as coordinate within them, and then also do simulations. So we got to really kind of expand our innovation and leverage more technology to become better communicators. And also during the events of 2020, we really were able to become subject matter experts in prefab, in the whole prefab ecosystem. So, where we used to consider prefab just modular boxes, we were able to really do a deep dive and then categorize this ecosystem into like a pyramid, essentially, where you have the single system components and then multi-system components and single space volumetric modular, and then the tip, which is traditionally what people consider prefab, which is that fully volumetric multi-space modular. So we got really smart about that. We also understood what our self-perform work teams can do. There's nearly 4,000 of them. They do great things every day. We were able to kind of capture, share, apply, and productize what they're doing so that we can be smarter about deploying those solutions, and then also strengthen our own entities. So we have, a couple of prefab entities as well, which really kind of sharpened the saw there and got better what we were doing. And then also, again, with technology, we were able to really understand what PDM or product data management really look like. So, we have this ecosystem of products. Where do we put them? How do we, continuously improve them so that we can, share it forward? And then decrease the inefficiencies of that kind of project to project start and stop. So that was a big part. And then I guess lastly, we really have noticed this convergence of manufacturing kind of simulation and then job site simulation. So we're able to do multiple iterations of multiple constraints or if-then statements of things that would happen, such as the black swan kind of pandemic, and what that would a negative kind of constraint would do to an outcome of a project. So a lot of work with the simulation environment. So a lot of exciting opportunities came out of it. Glass is half full approach, and we did the best that we could with the time that we had together on Zoom meetings.
Ray, that term that you just used, where you've optimized the opportunities that came out of the conditions that we were dropped into, is really a perfect segue into Luis's daily activities with some of the new tools and simulations that you're speaking of. So Luis, please respond to that central question. how your company and your professional focus in virtual design and construction changed and moved forward, building on top of the events of 2020.
So the one thing for us, right, is you know, we work a lot with design teams, and you know, because most of our work is design build, right, there's that collaboration piece that always has to happen. And you know, unfortunately the pandemic made it a lot more difficult to meet in person or have those type of meetings. So again, we did have to leverage the, you know, the Zoom, the team meetings, whatever mechanism it was to meet online. That definitely changed the way that we engage with our design team. But at the same time, there's the other end where we have projects in construction right now. So that really didn't change for us because you know, we can't build virtually. You know, a physical building still needs to be built. So that did affect us because we had some people that were working from home remotely, again, just because of, you know, protocols and whatnot, but then we still had to complete work on our physical job site. So there was that balance of how do we, you know, not overstress one part of our team, but then also make sure that they feel that they're getting some time off, obviously with everything going on. The one shift in the design stage was definitely, because we don't have meetings and everything else, was to find mechanisms to work collaboratively within a cloud environment. So one thing that we definitely leveraged on more was the BIM 360 component where, you know, we had more ability. And I think this was, I mean, the tools were there before COVID, right? But I think COVID definitely helped force us or help advance our use in that environment because of the fact that it just made visibility to the content a lot easier for our teams working remotely. Also going into different platforms when it came to laser scanning 360 images, as far as putting that in a platform where people can access the information a lot more easier than having to download, upload, or being in meetings to show them, you know, physical things and whatnot. So that definitely changed the way that we do things as far as communication, you know, having everything more collaboratively. I think that's what it definitely did for us, is it really forced us to work more collaboratively, leveraging the tools that we had, or, you know, me flying the drones and having that information available to the team. So they wouldn't have to travel to the job site to see what the existing conditions were. They could just go online, see what we've got out there, or also leveraging webcams, you know, as far as the live feeds that we had at the job site. So that was one way to get the design team to work virtually in an environment, but still be able to, you know, go to the job site and see how we're doing things. So that was one shift for us as far as what I was managing on a day-to-day basis.
Luis, thank you very much. You just expanded the conversation in about 4 different directions, and I really appreciate that, because that's a perfect segue into Sam's realm, which is the engineering part of design, construction, and development. So Sam, I know that from an environmental standpoint, you and everybody in every commercial space and residential space had a change in their lives. So please speak about how that changed your world and the professional engineering aspects of your focus now from 2020 into the future. You're on.
What was irony was that, first of all, mankind is very adaptable. You put them in any environment, they modify the mold, etc. The irony was that when 9/11 occurred, we were doing multiple box stores. I was flying approximately 40 times a year. As soon as that happened, technically that changed, and we literally called Walmart and we called Homebase, and we simply says we have to modify how we communicate. Essentially, we are talking about 20 years ago, and we were doing some of these elements that we are discussing now. And also between my lectures at USC, etc., the Zoom, all of us know in less than a month, it literally went 6,000 times, some astronomical numbers. The only one issue that has happened is that a lot of our client on the office side, as well as on the retail side, they suffered. They quite a bit, and we were doing floors by floors of space in downtown LA, which was not occurring. As Aaron was going to a ghost town in Century City, I have 3 buildings that has 5,400 personnel. Only 200 to 300 check in through the security card. Right now, we are doing a lead for one of the high rises, which actually I made it platinum 5 years ago. Now we are redoing it. Now we have to go to USGBC, simply say, how do we do it with 120 people? And it's very difficult. That's other challenges that's happening. But fortunately, my clients who have a lot of money through the architects, they still have money and they're building these very high-end homes. Fortunately, we are still doing 20 of those a year. But otherwise, a lot of the other segment of our work, which was hydrogen and industrial gas, because of the bulk gas requirement of the oxygen and other elements, that actually, because of the pandemic, we had a major increase in upsizing, modifying, and adding additional tanks to the hospitals, etc. So it has a lot of impact. The issue is for all of us is a little different. I believe Aaron was saying shot in the arm. There is a lot of my friends in the engineering world who are doing schools, hospitals, because of those shot in the arms, they're still active and they're still moving. But the other and the engineering groups, they are suffering and they are trying to just simply survive.
So thank you very much for that insight. And I know that the whole A&E, AEC industry shifted dramatically in the past 12 months. And Scott with Autodesk has been supporting, implementing, and taking the lead, taking real leadership in setting the pace for our future. So Scott, take it away.
Sure. You know, it's funny if you go back a little bit in time, the tools that Autodesk had that really helped us all get through that immediate work from home had been around for several years prior. Fortunately, unfortunately, maybe I should say, architects and their engineering counterparts aren't always the quickest to adopt new technology. We're creatures of habit, right? As put on my architect hat for a moment, and like to do things the same way. If you look back in history, it took us a long time to transition from a drafting board into CAD. Oh, we don't need those computers. We can draw it. I can draw it faster by hand still today, right? Then when BIM, Building Information Modeling, came out, which Revit was a tool in that BIM tool set came out, same thing. You know, I can still do it faster in CAD, and BIM's too slow, and we're not going to adopt that technology right away. So from somebody standpoint like Autodesk, we had those tools in place to allow people to work via the cloud, quote unquote, the cloud, right? A new technology, this cloud technology. And of course, there's a lot of people that we're maybe are still afraid of adopting this idea of working through the cloud. And my job was really to talk to you guys, my customers, about the virtues of hosting things in our cloud platform called BIM 360 at that time, and how it would allow you to work from anywhere in the world. And then suddenly this pandemic hit, and I had some of my customers went from a Friday we're in the office, and on Monday we're no longer coming to the office again, and we have to stay working. We have to stay as efficient as we were in the past. Luckily, we had those tools available. We could spring them up very quickly for those that weren't already adopted into that kind of technology. I have one particular customer, an architect that works for a big box retailer in the Pac Northwest. You might be able to figure out who that is. They needed to spin up 200 BIM 360 projects over the weekend because literally they left the office and they were not coming back on Monday. So through some other technologies, we helped them achieve that goal. They went back to work and it ended up being very seamless, and people went, wow, this technology is really great, right? And so it did. I think, Louis, you said it forced many of the architects to move in that direction. And now it's really changed the way that we're going to have to do things going forward, because what I'm hearing now is, because of these technologies, work from anywhere, work from home, you don't need the office. It also changes things like hiring structure. You can be an LA-based firm, and now you can go hire people that are based in Miami or New York or around the world, and they can work on your projects just like they're sitting next to you. You can see them do markups. They can assign you issues. You can be looking live at a 3D model all at the same time. And this is some really, really fascinating parts of that side of technology that I think have changed our industry and are going to continue to change the industry.
Absolute breakthrough time in our profession, in our industry, and in our culture. So Ron, I have a serious apology to make to you because I didn't introduce you formally as I promised. But I do want to introduce the co-moderator, Ron Everly, seasoned architect, huge experience with aviation, and just an incredibly intelligent part of our committee and part of our committee leadership. So Ron, this is a great time for me to give my voice a rest, for you to introduce yourself, and then to, if you will, move forward to some of the specific questions to our great panelists.
Sure, will do.
Panelists.
Certainly, no problem. I had been thinking, well, first of all, my role has been just keep time, make sure that everybody gets heard, and kind of flag when somebody runs over. I do appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself. And I'll just pass on that. I'll just say I'm Ron Everly. I've been an architect since, well, almost as long as you have, Ernest. We're pretty well tied, and and I love practicing architecture, but I got into project management, design build project management a long time ago, just kind of drifted that way as I joined a design build firm. And oh, by the way, for you architects in construction, about 3 years ago when I was at the national conference on project delivery, those architects that are working for contractors are called enlightened architects. So we have enlightened architects with us at this time, and I guess I got to do that for a while. But then for the last several years have been strictly an owner's representative in aviation world. For that, a lot of consulting. Anyway, enough of that. What I'd like to do is respond to Ernest's request, and I would like to focus on our two contractors and having to do with the technological innovation we've been talking about, how we've leaped ahead 10 years and all this great collaboration now we didn't think we'd be able to do when we were working remotely. And my written questions here is, how did what came out of 2020 help you now to plan or use the technology to serve your clients better, to improve design for those in the architects, John, and purely architecture, and develop the CDs, collaborate with contractors in the project team? We've heard some of that, but where my takeoff kind of went when I was listening to you, Luis, was, you still have to build buildings, right? You can collaborate building the model, you can collaborate the project meetings with the owner, but you still have to be out there, you and Ray, you got to build buildings. And so there were practices that changed, obviously, during 2020 that may have extended into this year and probably have. So since you mentioned it in your presentation, Luis, could you please take off on that and then hand it over to Ray?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing there, right, is I don't think, I mean, not a whole lot has shifted as far as like how we build things, right? It's not like the, there are some components that, robotics have been into play, but it's not like the robotics thing kind of took over and, we had machines, laying concrete, pouring concrete, laying out, studs and just none of that really happened as far as like what we would think. But the biggest thing was, again, just tying into the communication part is how do we communicate what we're doing out in the field to those that aren't available or can't travel because of restrictions and things of that nature. I think that definitely shifted the way that we approach that. Whereas, before you would have standing meetings where the design team would be out there, they would walk the job site with us. We had all these things. I think the biggest component was on that end, as far as our inspection team, as far as like our craft, our labor, that was business as usual. I mean, the biggest thing, right, was trying to avoid prolonged, contact. And thankfully, most of our projects were in a stage where it was still pretty outside. It was pretty well ventilated. So we didn't have anything, as far as like finishes and whatnot to deal with or to worry about. But the biggest thing was just how do we communicate things that had to be addressed with the design team for us to keep moving forward in the right direction. And then how do we leverage, things as far as, the model for our staff to have. So it was just this collaboration between getting the information and then having it be available to them within a couple minutes or so, or a couple hours, so that way they could keep building and it wasn't slowing down the process because they couldn't be at the job site or they couldn't physically be there, or we couldn't have meetings to address some of these things. I think that's the one thing that we saw that shifted was just the ability of having people communicate as fast as they could without physically being there.
Great, thank you, Luis.
Yeah, Luis, I'd like, in between that, I was kind of thinking, I was on behalf of an airport owner, local airport here, I was managing a project that was mostly indoors and wrapping that up during 2020. And then the same contractor was doing some other projects. And so phasing work and keeping people apart, keeping trades separated, that was a big deal. And your answer wasn't quite what I expected, but
Yeah, I mean, on that end, I guess for us, right, there was that sequence of events that is you couldn't put a lot of people in one space. We had to follow certain protocols. We could only have certain people. I think that did limit us on some projects. Like I said, I don't think that we had a lot of projects, thankfully, last year that were in that stage. So I can't really speak too much on that end. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I think we were very fortunate where most of our projects that we did have last year were in the, foundation, the erection of steel, things of that nature, where it was still outdoors. So it wasn't as much of an issue. So again, I can't speak too much to that end on how those teams kind of manage those things specifically, other than, as you mentioned, right, just scheduling things out. It might have, pushed things a little bit beyond, but nothing to the point where it was detrimental to our overall schedule.
Fantastic.
Looking forward, Luis, the events of 2020 put like afterburners on your activities and on your processes in a way that you were able to take virtual design and construction to a whole different level.
Yeah, and that's the one thing, we were, a lot of our projects that I had last year were in pre-construction. So that was most of my focus, was everything pre-construction and just leveraging kind of what we have already talked about as far as, the collaborative approach, the, BIM 360 environment, things of that nature.
Ray?
Yeah, I mean, I just got on a couple of thoughts here. So, fortunately, I think when the sky was falling back in, what was it, February, March of 2020, we paused, collected ourselves, and really turned the conversation to our clients and how can we help you navigate the pandemic. And we ended up having some really amazing opportunities to support these teams where we were bracing for a fall or a decline in revenue, and ended up propelling out of it with a higher revenue than we expected at the end of the year, because we were providing great support and service to our clients across all of our core markets. So whether it was coming up with solutions for modular COVID screening sites, or enhancing the head wall, medical head wall prefab components mid-design, and integrating those into design to quickly adapt to what the new norm was. We're really looking for and found great opportunities to support particularly healthcare, but also life science clients. So in doing so, I talked about productizing the built environment. We're modeling these things in very high levels of detail, and establishing the right supply chain, and doing demand forecasting so we can understand what that productivity needs to look like globally. And that really helped us kind of improve our technology there as well. And then, I guess talking about technology, I had never done a virtual job walk or a virtual factory tour, but that immediately became a need, because now you're thinking about creative ways to continue, business development and get work side of things, so that we can focus on doing work better. And so there was a lot of reality capture and augmented reality kind of advancements that we'd already been working on, but it was fuel in the fire to get better. And then a lot of laser scan, point cloud to 3D geometry type of pilots that we're working with too, and then IoT related items and craft tech improvements too, which were really exciting. But I think really, I guess I'm a little sidetracked here, but the question was, how are we helping design teams throughout this whole design process? And going back to what I said earlier, we got just so smart about the offsite and prefab ecosystem that now we really feel like we can give our trade partners and our design partners a competitive advantage in being much more efficient in the way that we design buildings. It was some of those kind of standardized products, whether it's stairs or exterior panels, or it's different types of innovative structural systems, or roof screens, or head walls, or bathroom pods, multi-trade racks, all these different things that now we can start chunking buildings and organizing it in a way that gives you a really good feedback loop on whether or not it's the right design. But then I think I'm most adamantly dedicated to leading the art and architecture, and really providing and giving an environment and nurturing an environment where we can just deliver beautiful buildings, but with standard objects. So there's a really great way to collaborate there. I'm gonna mute myself because I feel like I'm rambling, but just some good focus points that we've been engaged in with our design partners.
Ray, thank you very much, and you're a perfect segue back to John Denyon, your design partner, and how innovations in design have evolved now through this period and into the future. So John, please speak to that.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're talking about new passive strategies and sustainable design, that's something that we've been able to evolve. Starting back 12 years ago, we started really experimenting with passive design, and what I mean by that is, the idea of just putting a solar panel on your home and calling it a net zero home is not good enough anymore. We really need to start looking at materials, building orientation, how you shade your windows with shading devices, what are the architectural solutions that you could be using to strengthen your home? And so that was something we actually started 12 years ago, back in 2009. And we were very successful with that. But we took that knowledge and really applied it to something more recently. Back in 2017, we did a show home here in Fullerton. It was a net zero home, and we used all of those passive design strategies, and it was very successful. And so we're trying to push the envelope and do more of that. And what I'm really excited about is some of the new technologies that are evolving. We're working on a project in Lancaster right now where we're actually, they all have solar panels on the roofs. They all have the storage battery. There's nothing new about that technology. But what they do is they go beyond that, and they actually network all the batteries with a microgrid. You know, what a microgrid is, basically everyone's connected to each other through, you know, with their batteries. And so you're really starting to get a balance and offset the energy among your community. And so this is something that's it's been around for a while with corporate campuses and even college campuses, but it hasn't been applied at a residential level quite yet. So we're excited about that, but our client's actually going beyond that as well. And he's using flywheels in the community. And the flywheels are basically large turbines that are generating the power from all the rooftops, storing the energy and distributing that energy to all the other homes and some of the local schools and street lights and such. And so I'm really excited about those new technologies. But those are all really important, but we really got to start thinking, you know, even bigger than that. And our company's been working for over 10 years now. We're actually designing a city in Costa Rica, and the entire city is going to be operated off of garbage. Our client has successfully made agreements with all the garbage companies, and they're going to collect all the garbage. It'll dump it into a machine that converts the garbage into energy. And not only does it produce energy, but it actually extracts the petroleum, which produces diesel fuel for many of the trucks that drop off their garbage. It also extracts a lot of the water and produces distilled water. And what's great about it is the byproduct is carbon. And as you know, carbon can be used in the aftermarket. It can be used for agriculture, water filtration. It can be used for a lot of things. And so he's selling the carbon. And at the end of the day, it's zero emissions. And so, you know, when you start looking at sustainable technologies and stuff, that's where we need to be looking, not just looking at a solar panel on a roof. We got to look at design. We got to look at technologies. There are ways to really, you know, reduce our carbon footprint. And we're really excited about that. And by the way, we'll take the sewage from the entire city and put it back into the machine and convert your sewage into electricity that will power the city. So that's the global thinking we should be at right now.
John, thank you so much for that insight. It leads us directly back to engineering solutions and Sam's world, where he's got a global perspective of what zero emissions means globally today and into the future. Please speak to that, Sam.
There is one issue, only because we have such a limited time here. I actually wrote an article that you can pick it up from my blog. As John was indicating about the issue, primary thing is called the global warming. We are now reaching certain numbers, the 1 degree C, 2 degrees C, et cetera, et cetera. They are saying that all the places who are wet will get wetter, and those places which are dry will be getting drier. Where the unfortunate part is Canada is 122 degrees Fahrenheit, 50 degrees C, and there is fire in Holland. Who knew? One of the issues that I have is that, as John said, is no longer just a simply Cal Green or LEED. You have to overhaul the entire architecture. Right now, every architect that all these fancy homes that I'm doing in Newport and across the coast, all the roofs are jagged. Not a single one I can put a single roof, electric. And by the way, none of them are facing south. That's one of the issues. They're all facing somewhere else, not towards the sun. That's one of the items. So my issue is we were doing a project, waste to energy we were working on the preliminary in Philippines. The problem is water. If you don't have any water, you cannot even take the waste and burn it because you don't have water for cooling system. So as a catch-22, we are literally in a vortex and we are going down very, very fast. So those are some of the issues that I was looking at. The other components, of course, COVID-19 literally took the cup, and somebody said about a glass half full. Now the cup is the reversed. We don't know if it's full or half anymore. So all of that has been impacted. But there was another item that if you want to look at energy, because that's one of the primary issue, the third largest cost of the United States military is energy, which is totally getting wasted. People are using drones, try to capture, to identify where the waste of the energy of the building is. There are waste through, the selection of as John was simply saying, the drapes and the shades. There is so many low-hanging fruits out there. If you pick them up and use them, and fortunately, the millionaires, et cetera, they still have a lot of money. They don't worry about it. But I'm thinking of the mass and the formats, how we can save energy of what we have, and how we can pick up the low-hanging fruits for a better design. And I have also worked in the Ray Boff's industry in terms of boxing elements. There are so many components that unfortunately is called integration, which is missing, which means all these technologies are in different shelves. We can't package them. There's one more. I'm going to go to Hensel Phelps and DPR. The problem is, show me the contractors and the subcontractors who are perceptive for all these new technologies, because they're still out there. And how can you bring them up to the 20th century and simply say, okay, here's the tools and use it? You cannot put them in a package in 2 days or 2 weeks. It takes time for all of these sort of coalesce.
You could just work with the two of us and we're good. We'll take care of you. Okay.
So thank you very much for that input, because you've touched on a couple of sore thumbs here. Cost of energy, sore thumb. Integration of the new technologies into productivity. That's a real sore thumb. So Aaron, I'd like to have you weigh in just a little bit on financial sustainability, because from the developer's viewpoint, we still have to build a future. We've got new tools, we've got new technologies, we've got new capabilities, but there's still cost of energy impacts that we've got to deal with. So please weigh in on that.
Building on Sam's point, in adapting to new technology, I think it's easy to be in an architect's seat and say, well, why doesn't the developer, let me do this new technology or adapt this new way of building? You have to realize that we don't actually get to control the purse strings either. So as a developer, we're kind of the middleman between the project and the money. So we have a lender, and it could be anywhere from 50% to 90% of the project is financed through loans. And the other portion is an investor. So someone's giving us their hard-earned money to make more money for them. So if they give us money and we give them back less money, no one gets paid and nothing gets built. So we have to mitigate our risk. And we do that by not adapting technologies that are unproven. So if it doesn't have a track record and the prior standard already works, we're just going to go with the prior standard. Unfortunately, as an architect myself, I wish that wasn't the case, but that's just kind of how this industry works at this point. In terms of sustainability of finances, I think this is kind of an integral part, because so much of the sustainable conversation is based around kind of A&E and energy and whatnot and waste. But I think we tend to forget that the reason why we continue to grow and prosper is because there's actual profit in building things. Every project that any private company ever does, they're doing for a profit. And you have to realize that if that profit's gone, there's no financial incentive for the investor to invest. There's no financial incentive for the lender to lend. And so the developer doesn't get a project done. So what happens is, if there's a black swan event like we had, the market shifts to adjust to it. The problem that we had this time around is that oftentimes when you have a downturn, it tends to eliminate the weakest links. So if you think of natural selection, that kind of the weakest animals tend to die off and only the strong ones prosper. That used to happen historically. Now the Federal Reserve just injects trillions of dollars into the market and pumps up companies that technically should have fallen under and gone bankrupt. And so what happens is you have a plethora of capital and very few investments to put it in. So what happens is yields tend to drop, and when yields drop, there's less contingency for projects to actually become financially feasible. So if we're talking about financially feasible projects in the future, having metrics that make sense moving forward mean that we actually have projects to implement solar panels onto and to implement energy saving processes. And I think that's kind of an integral part of the sustainability question that really isn't mentioned much.
Aaron, thank you. And I think that you've just touched on some areas that Ray is especially taking leadership with, and that's providing the developers and the development community with new tools that they're proving to be available, sustainable, and now making change and influencing the developments of the future. So Ray, I think that's really what you're all about, is influencing the developments of the future with a different way of putting the pieces together, and not just being in construction, but in being in assembly of buildings and our cities and our communities.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So, we focus on what we can manufacture and what kind of products those would be, and then help integrate them. Whether it's on a platform of the future that has a variety of different, bespoke product solutions that tie together, that allow for the end-to-end kind of early site selection through, complete commissioning and turnover. That's been a focus area of ours for many years, and we have individual work groups, whether it's from to design development or even development services, where we're looking at sites and doing site evaluations, from design integration management all the way through the whole traditional project execution, with the variety of contract types. So we're very familiar with those spaces and meshing together that platform. But it's the products, right, in that pyramid I was talking about. So there may be great solutions that yield modular, fully volumetric modular solutions, whether it's in high density residential or hospitality, and it's wood or it's steel. It could be a variety of material types. But then there's also deeper dives. You start from like a modular perspective. There's clean rooms, there's bathrooms, there's central energy plants and electrical rooms, modular stairs, modular elevators. So all of our kind of advanced tech, life science, hospitality, healthcare, and higher ed, I guess, core markets are seeing those. But it really kind of depends on the right projects. And so where we really like to flex the prefab muscle and really start proposing those kind of the BHAGs. So if any Jim Collins fans out there, it's the big, hairy, audacious goals that we go for. And so one way we like to do that is, I love going into a project and saying, hey, this is a perfect 70-40-20 project. Everybody's like, well, what's that? So 70% offsite, 40% faster, 20% less than traditional construction. I haven't seen a project actually get that aggressive yet, but we end up having the right stakeholder conversations, understanding what products, means, and methods we can integrate on this project, or portfolio of projects. And then and we are successfully landing at 50% offsite and 20% faster with a 10% cost savings. So those are some of the areas that we are heavily looking at and excelling at right now. And I think if we could really just be that bridge between our design community and then the product manufacturers who are doing things really well, then that's where we feel like we're bullet smart and we can be really helpful for our design community and development community.
Back to you, Aaron. That's a great foundation for a future that you can weigh in on.
So I think Ray had a number that resonates with me, which was the 20% reduction in cost.
Yeah.
Because we have to weigh the benefits versus the risks, right? That's what I do. So if you're going to tell me that you're going to use a new process and it's going to save me 5%, I'm not going to waste my time. But if you say 20% and 50% faster or something, like, you've got my attention. And there are products out there, and I know you concentrate on the prefab side, but I tend to dabble in watching a few and researching some information on 3D printing, which is far from being kind of implementable on a consumer level scale. But 50% of the cost of building is labor, and if you can eliminate some of that cost, you can reduce potentially up to 50%. Although that's very far away. You can reduce a tremendous amount of your costs up front for the developer, which ultimately kind of our return metrics tend to stay the same. What happens is the market adjusts as technology is adapted. So that savings gets passed on to the end user. So when this technology gets implemented, it means that we're going to be able to cut costs and our competitors will be able to cut costs, but our investors will still want whatever return metrics are expected for that product type, which means that we pass that savings on. So the adaptation of technology, I think, is imminent. I think things like COVID tend to accelerate that process, but I think it will also be kind of exponential in terms of, we'll have these breakthroughs, and as soon as I think you get over hurdles like standardized code and seismic issues, then the adoption of these technologies, I think, will be as rapid and as prevalent as Revit is to BIM.
So this is where I feel like
you just got Sam's hand in the air. I'd really like to hear what he's got to say over here.
Yeah, the number one issue that I've had, again, I've been harping on this issue for many years. You do not have technologically advanced individuals in construction industry. You have to have an army of nerds. The issue is that the building that Aaron is in is a high rise. All of the mechanical systems are super electronic. All the lighting systems are electronic. You do not have electrical contractors. You have to have electronic contractors who they only show up to put your Netflix and your controls in your home. So really, my problem that I have, we are not producing enough individuals for all of these technologies that we are discussing. Now, we could find it at DPR or Hensel Phelps, but I can tell you, going back to democratization, the general public is not there. The other issue that I have with this entire format, I did a 4-hour lecture based on EJCDC, which is Engineers Joint Contract Documents Committee. They have a very good website of about all the court cases, and I took about from 1913 to 1917. I did about 100 cases. I came up with a 4-hour seminar. Majority of the errors and mistakes, the court cases, were among all the very name brand companies and architects. It was coordination, individuals, et cetera, where in one case, a landing was done 1.5 inch concrete versus 2 inches. So I'm just simply saying we could move forward, but we have to stay focused and not lose the fact that we don't have the individuals to do it. The other one is that we're going to get into litigations that will be published in this journal or in this society. Just an FYI.
Well,
So-
enter the next evolution of industrialized construction, right? So we talk about this, industry 4.0, and then what the kind of goal lists are, whether it's increasing labor productivity or fast tracking the rate of construction or reducing costs, or making customization affordable. Those are kind of all these goals, right? I agree that the contractor environment is lacking in skilled labor to do that. And when you do talk about the larger general contractors, we are a little more sophisticated than the general populace because we have great trade partners around us. Plus, we're investing in R&D and then in innovation and all these things. But you're right. One of the 5 limitations of industrialized construction is lack of skilled labor, but it's also social acceptance. It's also lack of compliance and regulatory bodies. And then also, this perception of an initial investment and expensive overall costs, right? But that's where I feel like modular manufacturers right now are doing a pretty darn good job. The ones who've survived the initial capital and slow production and actually ramping to get to a profitable manufacturing environment have this vertical integration concept down really well. And I think that we should understand what they're doing so that we can kind of bust through those limitations and be better integrated together along the whole OAECS environment. So unfortunately, I have to agree with you about contractors not being extremely sophisticated, but I do see this emergence in this education and foundational level of growth, exponential growth of that education.
John, it's back to you now because there's a lot of material here of 3D printing, consumer level adaptation, reducing costs, and manufacturing of all the building materials and the building components that they go together into our design capabilities.
Yeah. Well, before we start there, I just want to make one comment. And Aaron and I were having a conversation offline prior to the conversation, but there's something that he said was really important here. And that was, I think it's important that us architects have a better understanding of the business of the economics of a project. They're coming to us as professionals and we need to understand their business so that we can provide them with the right answers that they can afford within their funding. And so I thought that was a really good point. I think we all could do better as architects and understand that. Going back to your question, Ernest, you're asking about 3D printing and modular. I think 3D printing is something, it's definitely out there. It's still in its infant stages. I really don't have a lot of information. We have a 3D printer here that prints stuff this small. And I think this is a great technology. I think there's a future for it, but I really don't have much to add with regard to that. With regard to different materials, though, we've always experimented with different materials, everything from ICF to SIP systems to light gauge steel. In fact, we tried introducing light gauge steel in Saudi Arabia. As you know, in Saudi Arabia, they just use concrete, and concrete, it just takes forever to build, and it's just a brittle material. And there's just easier ways, and so we're trying to introduce new materials like SIP and light gauge steel. And at the end of the day, they just were not interested. They, and a lot of you understand this. You go to Mexico, you go to the Middle East, you go to China, everything's concrete. There's something about it where you can knock on the wall and they feel something solid. They come here to the US and they start knocking on our walls and they sound like hollow walls. And just getting over that stereotype of the material has been a challenge. And we were not successful in introducing those new materials in there. But, I just think we need to continue to innovate and use new materials and and figure out ways to lower costs. We'll continue to go down that road, but so far we've struggled a little bit.
Thank you very much, John. Who among the panelists would like to respond to that? Sam.
Yeah, there's one issue. I've gone through ICC listing. In order for you to list a product that actually will be pertinent part of the code and has to be used in the construction, you have to go through ICC listing. You have to go through a lab 17805, 825 certified lab. By the time you are done, 200, 300, up to $1 million, depending on what you're testing, before that gets adopted. There are many products, and I've worked at UCI testing hall. There are many products which are out there, but there are elements that does not even allow for you to go through. So in injecting a new product into the industry, that itself is a challenge. Marketing of it is wow. I have written every possible article against tankless water heaters. And finally, some company out of Japan invited me there because I wrote all the articles against them. There are certain products that come in because their marketing values are good. And there are many good components which are off the shelf that do not have the financial means to go through the ICC. Because all of us, we cannot use a product if it does not have an ESR report. And then if you are putting a plastic element in the building, and if it does not have ASTM E84 and all the elements for fireproofing, you cannot use it. So you can talk about new technologies, but you have to go through regulatory components, and God help you. And you have to have a lot of this to make it through.
Ron, I can feel you jumping up and down over there. What's your response to that comment?
Well, I was just thinking about how how we bring it back to kind of our theme, and I was getting ready to type you a little note. Something that Sam said earlier, though, made me think of a term. 2020 kind of wrought a perfect storm on us, with a plague, with lockdowns, with hits to our economy, and crazy weather patterns that are extended into this year that now we have to deal with and think about the future, which you touched on and all. But I was thinking, I had something here I wanted to ask Ray about, but before I did that, we've talked about the technology and how we've worked through technology, jumping 10 years ahead. And so I kind of wanted to get our friend Scott into the discussion about the provision of tools so that we can keep up with our, we have to keep up with ourselves, so to speak. We've got to collaborate. We have to build in the field. We have to, as it was said earlier, I can't imagine doing job walks virtually, or construction administration virtually, or take a walk around to, be able to take a walk around virtually to be able to propose on a project and bring in new work. And so, Scott, that was kind of why I was making some gestures here that I thought we could hear from you on this and kind of tie this together. And then after that, then it would be cool to go to Ray again and talk about how he applies that to what he does at DPR.
Sure.
Ray, thank you.
I can start by saying, coming from a technology company, we're obviously always looking forward and trying to understand what might help this industry going down the road. A comment earlier talked about the industrialized construction thing, and I think everybody on this call knows from Autodesk that we help with the AEC community, but many of you may not know that there are other divisions of Autodesk that focus on product manufacturing and manufacturing in general, and then we've got another division that's all around what we call media and entertainment, which is all the special effects for video games and and film and things like that. But if I go back to the idea around the industrialized construction, if we take what's going on in the other side, the manufacturing side of Autodesk business, and then the AEC community, we've got knowledge in both, and we can help bring those two things together. Now, in order to bring those two things together, we have to have a better way of exchanging data between what's going on in a product like Inventor or in a product like Fusion 360, for those that know those products, and then the AEC products like AutoCAD and Revit. And in order to exchange that data better, we have to have a better methodology for which to do that. And so that's where the cloud starts to come in. We as a group are so used to exchanging files with each other. Hey, send your file over to me so I have a new background. Send me your latest Revit file. Send me your latest AutoCAD file. And we're constantly exchanging files in this way. What if instead we just looked at it as a data standpoint? And this is something that Autodesk is focused on now, where rather than, hey, send me your Inventor file and let me figure out how to import that into my Revit session, let's just take the data that's there behind the scenes and make these things mesh together in a much more seamless way so that we can start to take this cross-industry pollination between manufacturing and what's going on in AEC. So there is a huge focus in Autodesk going forward of becoming more of a data-centric company and starting to look at how that information gets exchanged. Because at the end of the day, that's all we're doing. We're producing, 3D models and drawings and specifications, and all of this is we're creating data. And so again, like if there was a better way that we could go about putting that in a pool where all of the different consultants, parts and pieces could get at that data and use it in a much more effective methodology, we'd all be much better off.
Whew, that's a lot, huh?
It's all yours. Take
Oh
this.
man. So this area gets me really, really jazzed. So cut me off if you need to. But so I think the question was how is DPR leveraging what Scott was mentioning? So I mentioned product data management, or PDM, earlier. First off, that's the way we can categorize and store products. And by products, I mean, assemblies or chunks of things that would normally be built on, traditionally stick built on site. We've moved those off site in a manufacturing setting. We've done all the design and engineering requirements. We have the stamp on the drawings. We've worked with strategic partners to procure their types of products that we can put together and then move to site and put in place. I do acknowledge the arduous effort it takes to actually get a credential of an actual product and how much money it takes to go into that. But for the sake of the conversation, products are assemblies. So assemblies can be broken down into very large chunks into single parts, right? And so having a taxonomy of the way that we talk about these things is a way that we can organize the data around these assemblies. So you've probably heard the term Dfma, which is Design for Manufacture and Assembly. Well, Autodesk is doing this thing now where they're calling it Data for Manufacture and Assembly. So how do we compile the data and use it so that it's interoperable between different systems is a big part of it. So, what's the rolled up amount of data that's good for front end activities is much different than what a manufacturer needs on a bill of materials and supply chain and manufacturing perspective. And it's
Nicely.
So that's what we are going through, these different kind of IC, industrialized construction, and workflows to map out our current state and then future state. And we're starting to piece together the right programs to create the platform that's good for our needs. And our needs are much different than our competitors' needs. But I think one of the best things we're doing is we're sharing our knowledge with our environment. Rising tides lifts all boats is the way that we look at it, because the whole industry needs to work together to push us into working smarter together and being able to integrate and execute these product delivery types of means and methods. So hopefully I answered the question. I didn't talk about Forge or Fusion Lifecycle, but those are two areas that we're looking at heavily.
Yes.
I'm not trying to advertise everything Autodesk, but we are looking at other platforms as well.
Of course.
That have other things going on, but maybe some of that factory and field-based simulation, wink, wink, Scott, that we need to work together and figure out. But
Absolutely.
those are exciting areas that we're leveraging what the community has to offer.
I totally agree. It's an extremely exciting time. It takes me back to when we were transitioning to BIM, and early on I saw the benefits of doing a model. Right, we as architects we've always built models, physical models, basswood and things like that. So we have these electronic versions, and we can start to simulate things with them. So I love that idea around technology. And I think where we're at now is at that same kind of crossroads that we were in. As I mentioned, we're moving more into that field of data rather than field of file exchange, and so there's some very exciting possibilities on the horizon. And when I say that, it's near term. We're actively working on these things today.
As we transition a little bit, I have to take a deep breath because I was in a conversation with Ray and Ron and a couple of other people the other day, and I have to admit, they talk faster than I can listen, and they use terms that I have to spin back and work to catch up, to understand and fully embrace what the terms mean. So this symposium is moving fast and moving into a direction that I'm so pleased to be involved in. And so thank you, each one of you panelists, for enlightening us in the audience. Because you're taking us into a future that you live in today that a lot of us don't have access to every day. A lot of our clients don't speak the same language that you do, Ray. And a lot of the people that Luis is building for are just holding on to the rope that Luis is pulling very fast in front of them in simulation and drone technology and participation of all the subcontractors in the actual construction documentation. So this is a fast moving train, and I can't express to you how pleased I am to be on the train with you. So thank you for this conversation. Back to you, Ron.
Well, I got
my head part of the time here.
well, what I was getting ready to say was very similar to what you said. Like when we were in that discussion the other day, and right now I feel the same. I feel like it's probably the least intelligent guy in person in the room when you're listening to these people talk about what they're doing and how they're taking construction into the future. And so I appreciate that too. I was just thinking, we'd like to have a little bit more free flow of conversation between you all. Some things that you said, Ray, and Scott as well, about the technology, about the tools. What I was getting into next, there are a lot of small contractors out there, a lot of small consultants like myself who can't afford all those tools. If I were, 25, 30 years younger, it might even be able to be less able to afford them. Sorry,
I'm a lot of small clients too.
Small clients, as well as you've got sophisticated clients like I've been privileged to work for who know what they're going to do with the model after the contractor, leaves the job. They've got a plan for operation of the facility. Others, like John said, don't care. I don't need that. Just, draw up my plan and build it, please. Draw up my building and build it. So I think that there's something we called the other day called democratization of the software or of the programs. Look, and I'm wandering back to you now, Ray, putting together a team, or Luis putting together a team that ranges from the large contractors like you are to medium size to small firms to the disadvantaged firms that are in a government or government related job. You really have to have on your team. So just a pile of thoughts out there, but I think maybe go back to the democratization and how you're able to integrate a team that doesn't have all the tools that we're looking forward to using. Anybody?
I simply am delving into this primarily because I am part of a good number of 3 or 4 engineering societies, and majority of the engineering groups are very small. And the beauty of the state of California is that they are still being used. If you're in Cincinnati, Oklahoma, Texas, etc., generally small engineering firms don't exist because they technically draw something on a piece of napkin and build it. They don't need it. Here, instead of California, the codes have values, etc. Where in Texas, if you're outside of Austin, build what you want, we'll come and check it out. And if with the wind, this thing goes away, who cares? So really, a lot of engineers are out here. They are really trying to literally survive. The question from Autodesk is, do you have a Pinto version of what you just talked about? And we call it AutoCAD Lite. Is there a Revit Lite or something? Or at the beginning stage, so these guys can get engaged. When at USC, there's a professor that is also an architect. He tells me he draws as fast in Revit as he does with AutoCAD. So he doesn't care, although the client may not pay. But before we get there, A, he cannot afford $1,700 to $2,000 a seat. B, by the time he gets to the level of my friend, the professor / architect, it's going to be years. So, we are going to be talking about hypotheticals, not reality.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few ways to address that from an Autodesk standpoint. So there is AutoCAD LT. We don't call it light. It does not actually stand for light. It actually stands for limited technology. I have to play the party line and make that clear. And there is a Revit LT as well. And obviously those, because they are limited technologies, don't have the full functionality of the full versions of Revit or AutoCAD. And they are cheaper. So the sole proprietor can probably do as much as they need to with a product like Revit LT as a large firm like an AECOM might need to do with the full version of Revit. The full version of Revit allows multiple people to work on the same file at the same time. The Revit LT version does not. It's meant for a single sole proprietor to work on a single model by themselves. And then I would say what we've tried to do over the course of time is give you guys a lot more flexible licensing plans. In the past, you had to have capital outlay and buy a product like Revit at full retail price or whatever you negotiated with the reseller partner, and then put it on a subscription in order to maintain it if you wanted to maintain it. Well, we've done away with all of that now, so those subscription values have come down. You don't have to have the massive capital outlay, let's just call it $5,000 or $6,000 one-time fee to buy Revit up front. You can now subscribe to it for as little as $320. That's a month. If you have a short project and you only need it for a month, subscribe to it for a month for $320, much more affordable. Or if you know you've got this long project going on that's going to last years, then subscribe to the 3-year subscription version of Revit. And it's going to save you substantially over doing that month to month or even a yearly cost. So there are different ways of going about that. Now, just recently, you'll start hearing word about this. We're actually introducing another plan in place that is going to allow really from small to large to have a much more flexible scheme of using the Autodesk portfolio. We're using a flex payment system, which is based on the idea that we call tokens. You actually can purchase pools of tokens, and then you can fire up Revit. And within that 24-hour period, the Revit session costs you X amount of tokens, and I don't know what that is. I take it back to the old arcade days, and for those that, when I mention this, will know, if you played the old pole position, the sit-down version cost 2 quarters, where the stand-up version cost 1/4, right? There was different values for those things as they went on. But because it's token-based, we don't care what you launch. Like if you need AutoCAD for a day, you launch AutoCAD, and it consumes X amount of tokens out of your pool. So it gives you a lot more flexibility in that overall pricing structure. So you're not having to have capital outlay, or you're not saying we need to be on subscription for an entire year when I only have a couple interns for the summer, and I don't need to buy the software for a year so they can use it for 3 months. So hopefully that helps out a little bit. We're trying to be proactive. We understand cost is hugely important to you guys as far as a the software goes. We're obviously, everything you're doing when you're doing building information models and producing plans, sections, elevations, your construction documentation, you're reliant on our software to do that. And so again, we're trying to be as cost effective as we can in providing you with different solutions in order to do that. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Thank you, Scott. You've enlightened me to a couple of things that I wasn't aware of, and you make the future a lot easier for a lot of us to weigh in on.
We try.
John, you're being quiet, and I really would like to hear from you a little bit more as and Luis, as we continue to consider boots on the ground and clients, small clients, large clients, who haven't adopted future technologies and future ways of how buildings feel and look and are constructed. I'm just fascinated with this world of 3D printing of buildings. I'm seeing it all over every state in the union now has a 3D printing building out there in the desert someplace. And what does that mean to mom and pop and the clients that you're working with today?
Well, going back to your earlier statement, it really depends on your client. Our company does work with small boutique home builders. We work with the large public home builders, and then we work with the more sophisticated multifamily companies. And I will say that our multifamily projects, we are doing those in Revit. Our consultants we're collaborating with are using Revit, and we're doing true BIM, technology. And then you get into single family detached, and Scott, maybe you can chime in a little bit here, but we've been challenged to do production housing, single family detached, where you have a home that's maybe got 3 different elevation styles, and it's really not the most efficient. We do have a couple of clients that require us to use Revit on it, but I got to tell you, it's kind of a waste of time for the single family detached. It's a wonderful tool for the multifamily hospitality, but I just don't feel like it's ready there. And on top of that, I think it really depends on your client. Aaron, for example, is a sophisticated, a client. They're doing large projects, but then you might look at a Lennar, who's also very large, but they don't care. In fact, they don't even care about design sometimes. And so, what they just worry about the bottom line. They don't care if you draft it on a napkin or on AutoCAD or Revit. They don't care. They don't care what we do. And so it's always been a challenge. And Sam, you said something earlier too. We do a lot of work all across the country. And truly, have you guys seen the construction documents that you need to produce to do something in Texas? It's like 3 sheets. In fact, you don't even have to put your stamp on the drawing. So you're dealing with different sophistication levels here, and you just really need to understand. You need to understand that before you get into the project, because as we all know, as wonderful as Revit is, and it's a great tool, it takes a little bit more time to do it right, and it may not work for your budget.
I'll jump in real quick and agree with you. I've heard it repeatedly on the single family, development kind of stuff. Like you're saying, the floor plan 1 and the floor plan 1R with the 3 different facades and the option to have a den in the front or a bedroom, right? In some cases, it doesn't work to do those kinds of things in Revit. And, honestly, I think we need to get better at some of those very nuanced things. Another area I think that Revit doesn't excel in right now is landscape architecture. We don't really have the tools in place for doing landscape architecture, and we need to be better there as well. We're continuing
civil engineering.
What was that? Civil engineering. Yeah, and you'd have to talk to our whole entire group. That is our infrastructure group that develops a tool that's called Civil 3D. It's based on AutoCAD, and why we don't have a Revit-based civil product yet. Maybe we will at some point down the road. But in any case, I think we're still trying to learn. We're still trying to continue to develop the software. Those that are Revit users have seen recently, especially with the most recent release, that the production got stepped up. There's a lot more emphasis on new tools, new features, new functionality, and that will continue to go forward. And honestly, we just need to hear from more of you, that are in that single family production home environment. Like, we need these particular tools to make our work more efficient. And obviously, the more we hear about that, and the more that, that helps the cream float to the top, so to speak. So it's all about development and where the need is from you guys, our customers.
Yeah, I'm actually happy to hear that, because I think that's really important. There needs to be more of this dialogue and really understand what the limitations are on our side, because like I said, it's a great program, but it's just not great for all projects.
Right.
So what I wanted to introduce is that Luis lives in a world where he's got his both boots on the ground every day, and he lives totally in a VDC world, virtual design and construction. So please, Luis, weigh in on this conversation from your perspective, because you have so much experience and a vision for how your passion is informing everybody in this room, as well as our audience, as well as your future clients and design partners.
Yeah, so I think one of the challenging things for me, right, is engaging so early on, getting in touch with the design team, the engineers, everyone, right? The basis is to be able to design something that works. So we collaborate with all of our trade partners to make sure that, the systems, that they're designing are going to be able to get built. Or if we're, overloading one room with too much, if there's too much going on in one room, right? When you think about like overhead, content, right? A lot of the coordination, if we have, just too much going on, how do we kind of redesign that area so we're not putting too much in one space that it just can't physically fit, so we spend so much time on the front end to coordinate all this stuff, because ultimately our goal is to be able to build something that works out in the field. So one thing is we're finding ways to make the schedule, work, right? So I spend so much time on the front end, getting everyone on board, helping the team so that we can have a sign off and then, produce shop drawings. So there's a lot that goes into, kind of getting to this point. And now we get to let's install it. And then sometimes we just see, or we've seen in the past where the information just stops. People are only now looking at 2D documents to build everything. They're not leveraging the model. They're not leveraging the technology. Because some people are very apprehensive to it, because they're like, I've been doing it this way for 20 years. Why would I want to change now? Why would, someone young that doesn't have as much experience as I do be telling me how to do things out in the field? I think that's one thing on some of these larger projects that we've experienced. And I think maybe to the point of John, as he was saying, right, for some of these smaller projects or something that is, more production housing, there isn't that need, because it's wood. We're dealing with lumber where you can kind of, shove things around and make it fit, because no one's going to care what's behind the wall at the end of the day, as long as the house works. Right. Whereas for us in more of a commercial environment, say like in healthcare, we can't do that, because everything has to be very much, there's this, it has to be very methodical as far as how we're designing and how we're installing it, because at the end of the day, if we need to, go in there for repairs, we need to know where everything is.
Yeah.
Or if there's something that does happen now with, facilities management, right, where they want to be able to identify something in the model, get the specifications, when the last time that thing was serviced, right? There's a lot of components that go into different environments, and that's where the technology kind of shifts as far as, between, say, something that's smaller versus something that's larger. And I think that's the one thing that we deal with, because we run different projects. Some of them are smaller, some of them are larger. So for me, it's finding the right solution, because at the end of the day, right, that is my goal, is to enable the team to build something out on site. I got to put on my hard hat, my boots, and actually walk all this information and talk to them and have them understand what it is that we're building. And that's where our goal right now is to try to leverage all of that information so they have it at their disposal. Right now, it's a lot of iPads, tablets, things of that nature. So they're not having to carry, 30-pound rolls of plans out on site. And that kind of ties into one thing that I addressed earlier was the communication of, if I were to update a drawing in the office, people out in the field would be able to just, resync and then have that latest information. Or if it's an RFI that, helps really answer something that we're, having troubles with out in the field. So I think that's one of the things for me is, how do I engage our team out on site to leverage the technology to not necessarily see it as a burden or just another step that I have to deal with, more along the lines of how we leveraging that information to their benefit. But sometimes we find that there is not that much of a benefit, right? So that's one of the things for us, is to delineate what is gonna give us a value at the end of the day versus something that we're just doing because that's what everyone else is doing, or because we want to be advanced in technology. But sometimes the technology, although it's good and it's there, might not necessarily serve a purpose for what we're trying to do out in the field, because at the end of the day, schedule, budget, that's what drives, and quality, right? Schedule, budget, quality, that's what drives us out in the field.
Back to you, Aaron. I know that although you live in a world of entitlements, I know that you have a firm grip on your hard hat. Oh, Ray had a question. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was clapping. That was brilliant, Luis. That
Was brilliant.
Yep.
Thank you, Luis.
And with one hand, I cannot clap, so I got to show what Ray did.
We're
That was a handicap joke, by the way. ADA certified. Sorry.
Aaron, back to you.
Sure. We have a project here in Century City. It's the Next Century project. So it's a 16-story hotel building, and we're building two 44-story condominium towers behind it. I'm not intimately involved in that project, but from what I've seen, the implementation of technology is really used as a supplement to kind of our management of information, as well as our kind of our legal blanket. So we documentation is quite huge. Like we document on a weekly basis, and the systems that we use there are all digitized, so I can go up online and sign in and see every week's documentation for every kind of unit and space on quite a large project. So it's a pretty extensive endeavor. But to the extent that that technology is kind of proliferated through our smaller projects, I think the expense kind of outweighs the cost. I mean, we do some smaller boutique projects that are 30 units in a very high barrier to entry market, and those are stick framed. And so although the architects that we work with are still using Revit just for I think communication reasons with our structural and our MEP, the need for it is much less in terms of technology, the sophistication of the project, right? Like John was saying regarding some of these public builders, they don't necessarily need that level of technology, and the tool needs to be focused to the actual task at hand. But I think that that's also where, excuse me, some of the opportunity is to innovate, because when you do something the same way for 100 years and the technology changes over that amount of time, there's someone that's going to come in from a different market that looks at things differently, that's going to treat a house like they treat a cell phone or like they treat a car. And that's where you're going to get innovation, because I mean, we've seen things like Elon Musk do that we never thought people would do, simply because he's willing to take a risk and he's willing to use his own capital. So there will be people that will step into the shoes of the entrepreneur in our industry and we will look at them with shady eyes. And, the Elon Musk of 3D printing, we will all talk about how dumb of an idea it is until they become the Lennar of 3D printing and eliminate the need for half of the labor force or something. So I think we're moving in that direction, and I think it's just a matter of time.
Thank you very much for that perspective. Totally agree and applaud that.
Can I mention here at this time it's 7 o'clock, and I typed a chat message to all of our attendees about questions they might want to put to our panel, and haven't seen any yet. So
I did, if I could jump in, I did get one sent to me directly when I was mentioning the whole idea around data as opposed to files earlier from an Auto's perspective. So the question was really about data security and let me get it, and liability, right? Liability I probably can't address. I'm not a lawyer or into the contract side of things, but the data security side of things obviously is hugely important for any of this stuff to succeed. So if we are to honestly become a data company, Autodesk takes the safety and security of our customers' data at the highest level. We do have a website for anybody that's interested in more information about this. I can put it in the chat, but if you can remember it, it is trust, like you're trusting somebody. So trust.autodesk.com takes you to basically our security website and talks about the different security protocols that we currently adhere to in our cloud today. Also talks about the ISO certifications that we adhere to with the different various products that stretch across our cloud. And then, last part of that is really, when we talk about Autodesk's cloud, it's really not Autodesk's. We actually buy space and buy compute from Amazon. Everything in the Autodesk cloud is actually hosted on Amazon AWS. And one reason for that is because they're one of the largest data providers in the world. And the way that they handle safety and security of data matches what we need to do as well. So data safety and security is at the highest level of any of this stuff. It comes before any of the software is ever created. So I just want to throw that out there. But yeah, totally agree. Like, we have to make sure that this data doesn't get in the wrong hands.
I have a question and introduction if you guys wish to discuss.
Sure. How much more time do we have?
Yeah.
we have 25 minutes until Ernest needs to wrap up, maybe 20.
Wonderful. I'm going to be really quick, but this is really exciting moment for us. One of your panelists invited me to discuss this, but this was we're discussing energy leaks through buildings, and I think everybody here would know that there is technologies out there that are used to detect energy through IR photos, right? Infrared photos. And this is very exciting because after 10 years, we've developed a software that is able to interpret the data into dollars. So for example, when you guys are designing buildings, or if there's any construction companies that have actually built the buildings, what we can do right now is we fly the drones around. And if you take like the US bank building downtown, that will take about an hour to do. And we can tell you to the dollar, and this is where we're different, to the dollar where you're losing energy and how much energy you're losing. So it could be 1.5 inches caulking on the 44th floor that's causing argon to leak out. We can tell the customer that information, or we can tell if there's any serious structural damage. So you guys are actually the first ones in the world to hear this. So we're about to roll this out. And as I mentioned, one of your panelists is out there. So knowing that you guys are rock stars, since a lot of my uncles are architects, we want to kind of discuss this because this is something really beneficial for your customers. Typically what we do, and just to give you a background, my name is Sapand, former commissioner with the city of Los Angeles. I was appointed by Mayor Virgosa, and my term ended with Mayor Garcetti. Being a free agent now and my term ended, I worked with building and safety. So bringing the Olympics in, to bring in businesses in because people were leaving, moving to the computerized system, that was all me working in the background because the mayor gives orders and I do stuff. That's the way things work. So I was very fortunate to hear about this technology and to be able to roll it out. Right now, the company that developed it is Canadian, and the Canadian government is using it. They're using it extensively for all the buildings. And yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know about it. If you have any questions to discuss, I'm here. But this is a very exciting moment as far as detecting energy loss. There's no one in the world that can do it. So if Biden rolls out his agenda, we're the ones that can really be able to give you the dollar amount of what's losing. So, sorry.
I was going to say, it sounds, from my standpoint, being a technologist, sounds super exciting. I think it goes to the idea that the compute space has changed greatly. If you said U.S. Bank, you could do, what was it, an hour and a half, as far as I mean,
and by the way, the resolution is 1.5 inches.
Yeah,
so
see, that's amazing.
What we do is provide a 3D model for your customers. Zoom in to 1.5 inches within their walls and find out what's going on. And our report will dictate what the problematic areas are, where you're losing energy, how much energy you're losing. We did a client in Glendale recently, and they wanted to be LEED certified. We found out that they're actually leaking 21%, which is incredible. Most of the buildings, and I think American buildings, existing buildings, are on average like what, 53 years old or something like that. So you can just imagine, especially the coastal buildings, right? With Miami, for example, the Florida incident, we would be able to tell. It's an MRI for your skin, basically, right? It's an MRI for the building envelope. We can tell what was happening. We couldn't say that the rebar was rusting, but we could say that there's damage and you better take a look based on the coastal conditions and the air, the salt, whatever it is. We could have done something about it. So this is really exciting. We're ready to roll it out.
Sure. Well, what the gentleman has brought up brings me back to a question I had for Ray and for Luis, and I kind of think I'd want to go back to Luis because he's the guy that puts the project together and pre-design. Is going back to various technologies. Again, my old question about the team that ranges from the contractor that builds billion-dollar buildings to the subcontract or even the consultants on design build team that don't have those capabilities, and you have to put out a set of documents or a model that you can build from, and then get before you do that, you've got to get a plan check, then you've got to build it, and then you have to commission it and turn it where this gentleman is coming in, and then turn it over to the owner in a way that he can, like one of you just said, you've got to go find the pipes in the walls and where the power is coming in and all those tubes under the slab and whatnot. It takes a great deal of coordination to pull that together if you don't have software or even collaborators that can talk to each other electronically.
Yeah.
So how do you work around that, Luis?
So I think that's one of the biggest obstacles right now as far as accessing, like you mentioned, that information, because at the end of the day, we turn it over to the owner. And so I guess one way that we are managing that is we do provide services now where we act as the kind of the services team at the end, right? So we act as a service team, and because we've built it, and our kind of pitch at that point is, listen, we've gone from proposal to design to pre-construction, construction. Now let's help you operate this building to the best ability from all the information that we have, because sometimes and I think this is just the nature of just how things have been until people have kind of gone through that process where they've grown up with the technology, that they understand it, they can work with it, and the software is there for them to actually utilize it. So right now we're acting as that like middle person to help provide them the information that they would need, right? So how do we get the information from the model? What type of software are we using? So we act as that kind of middle person to from, you know, when we're done, when we turn it over, to them actually operating it and actually utilizing the information. So right now that's a service that we do provide. There are other companies that do it as well. So sometimes the you know, if it's a very sophisticated owner, they'll have a separate group to do that for themselves. And then that way we just make sure that we turn over the information, and they have very specific parameters that we need to provide in our model so that they can leverage that information. But sometimes there just isn't that level of sophistication, or, you know, it's just not quite there. So unfortunately, sometimes that information dies. And we're still kind of, you know, at that point, it's more or less providing them the information in like PDFs and whatnot, and they do with it what they can. But I know that's one thing as far as the a hurdle within the industry, as far as finding groups that are able to really leverage that information and, you know, understanding the software you use and, you know, things of that nature.
Well, I think that's what I would expect your team to do. But then, you know, and as you say, it ranges from red line markups out there on the board, which some of the contractors are still doing, to the electronic information that maybe your guys are doing, and you've got to pick up, you know, from the red lines to the CAD to whatever, and pull it into one unified document. And in this case, we're talking about a model that the owner can use, and that could take you some time to do unless you've made an efficient you know, plan for it. And so Ray, and just kind of wrapping up on that, what's your take on that?
Well, yeah, I talked about the right projects, selecting the right projects, working with the right teams earlier. And, you know, we think there's plenty of opportunity to leverage, you know, our platform, the products that, you know, that we use, from early, you know, BIM integration and leveraging the world of VDC, but then also, you know, our owners, developers, design partners, taking advantage of the ability to have that support service there. So we love working with, you know, the boutique hotels, the larger hotels, the you know, more hospitality type projects where we can look at the right delivery method, whether it's design assist or design build or IPD, you know, contract types, and then be that partner there, leveraging our technical capabilities, being a technical builder to detail the right details, to have those modeled in an appropriate way with the right data so that it can be transferred to the owner operator. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's a great opportunity to educate more around us and leverage those maybe costly, you know, types of platforms, because we have that infrastructure there, which is just what Luis was saying, you know, as well. So, you know, I think there's a great opportunity there for us to advance our understanding and technology capabilities, and should be, you know, heavily considered.
Cool.
Would it be possible if I just ask one question? And it's really for Ray and Luis. We're finding in our reports, for example, construction companies forgetting to put in the insulation in. I was just talking to the CFO of Providence Hospital, and he said, "No, we want to do it, and we did it with the camera guys, but we don't know how to complete the project. So we find out all the faults, right? But we need someone to actually go in there and build and so is it okay if I can contact you guys after this? We're gonna need, yeah, we need some muscle.
Do we have Anything else? Oh, there's some. I was just going to ask, do we have any other questions from the
There is one item that I have. It's called a multiple-edged sword. It's not even a double-edged sword. In the lead system, there is something called measurement and verification. You measure through technology, you measure, you gain, and you put it in some sort of a chart to find out the ups and downs so you can learn for the future or how the trending goes. The second part that we have seen, in fact, I got a call from one of the cities, from the desert cities, and they wanted to sue somebody because the state of California says that if the building is more than 10,000 square feet, you must do commissioning. Once you go through the commissioning, of course, in a very large buildings, they do that anyway, but the laws, California Green Code mandates 10,000 and then 50,000, and depends how you do it. But overall, the one other component is that once you have so much technology, you have so much data, and the attorneys love elements that you can go sue. And that has been one of the negative impact of it, because the guy says, I will give you this temperature of this room as 78 degrees, and it does not happen, or the flow is so many GPM. It doesn't happen because you got all these measuring devices. We have seen the attorneys come back and say, you did not give us what was on the basis of design. On the other hand, there is so much information that you could come back and extrapolate data. My problem working with the property managers, they don't know what to do with the data. They don't know how to analyze it. It's there. They can gain so much information for forecasting, for capital expenditures, etc. And fortunately, they are into leasing, not understanding and not analyzing the data. That's one of the multiple facets of the data that is out there. Unfortunately, is getting either used or abused in either case.
Thank you. And that just is a perfect segue into the beginning of our wrap up. And in our mock symposium, where we were all in the same room, one of the most valuable things that I received from our conversation was the takeaway from each of these panelists. So I'd like to start with Aaron and get an expression, since we don't have a lot of other feedback from the audience. I'd like to get an expression from you, Aaron, of your takeaway from this conversation.
Sure. I think that that my first point that I made regarding kind of leaps and bounds happening in such a short amount of time, I think is important because it has occurred throughout history, and it will occur again. And I think that the effects of COVID have not yet been seen to its full end, and that the market is still changing and the technology is still changing. And I think that that how it affects our industry in particular, I think of Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz, who mentioned that the more important invention of the internet, the better contribution to humanity, is actually its ability to democratize geography, not even like more so than the internet itself. It's more important now that people can work wherever they want to in the world than actually the internet being available to everyone, which I thought was a contradictory statement, and I didn't believe it at first. But the more I thought about it, and the more we talked about it, the more I thought about how it changes the built environment. We're talking about, well, automation, how do you build skyscrapers? Sam mentioned that. It's like, well, why do we need to have skyscrapers if everyone lives in the middle of nowhere and puts on goggles to go to work? So I think that there are things maybe that we haven't even touched on here today that trickle through. And I think it just goes back to we're in a point in which there's kind of an acceleration of cultural change and cultural adaptations that will trickle through kind of our industry. And I think we're yet to realize what those changes are to their full potential.
Well, thank you so much, because you just now touched on the global interchange of culture, and that's a touchstone for John, where his reach is globally and has a perspective that really connects with your comment, Aaron. So John, we would really like to hear your takeaway of this conversation this afternoon.
Yeah, well, what I really liked about this conversation is you really start understanding everyone's business. I think a lot of time we all operate on our own bubble, and to really understand the technologies that Scott has, or some of the capital opportunities you have with Aaron, and Sam's doing some of the energy and modular with Ray. I mean, in Luis and in construction. I just think, what if we just always had these type of dialogues where we could just communicate and understand each other's business even better? And if we were to do that, I just think as a industry, we could just be on fire. So I would, I just met a lot of you guys in the last week or two, and I'd really like to, personally, like, continue the dialogue offline and see what we can do to help each other and just make each other better.
Thank you so much, John. That's exactly what the Project Delivery Knowledge Committee is all about. That's why we invented this committee.
Well, good, well, it's working.
Every single month, we're in this conversation, we're in this dialogue, and everybody in this room is invited.
Good.
Next takeaway would be from Ray.
Yeah, John, I think said it very well. I mentioned before, rising tides lift all boats. So I think there's a responsibility of all of us to overshare, to educate, to provide examples. And you can tell from all of our panelists, they're extremely well versed in their focus areas along the whole project delivery life cycle, that we have a lot to learn from each one of them. And I'm just excited about what industrialized construction looks like. There's this exponential growth that can be very noisy at times, quite frankly. So digesting that information and understanding and staying the course of whatever the mission, the vision, the values, the purpose, of what your focus areas are, I think are very valuable too. So yeah, I mean, I've had a great time chatting with everybody too, and I've learned a lot as well. So kudos to you, Ernest, and everybody to bring us together, and look forward to participating in future events as well.
Well, I agree with John about just getting on offline. When I was in college, we always went to Shakey's Pizza, and there was always a pitcher in the middle of the room, and we'd stay up all night. We'd stay up all night in this conversation. So, Sam, I see you smiling.
Always.
I know you have much to say. Please share.
All I can say is, when I have too much to talk as a professor, you cannot shut a professor up. Therefore, I have a blog, and I put down 4 items, plus ditto to everybody's statement that has been said. COVID-19 impact has not been seen, and I gave 2 lectures, 1.5 hours for AIA. It is at the AIA website channel. I do have it on my LinkedIn. 9,300 people are there. Plus, it is on my blog. The second part of that is a 1.5 hour session. We have not seen, as Aaron said, we have not seen the legal impact of COVID-19 on buildings. That is major impact is on my second 1.5 hours. There are 800 lawsuits out there, and that's only because the courts are closed. Imagine the avalanche that's going to come. The global warming, we discussed it. All we need is another 0.5 degree. Whatever architectural you learn, it goes back to what John said. We have to be thinking about as if we are in an energy crisis plus a global crisis, whether it's a rain. And as I mentioned in my system, my daughter went to Colombia, and when you were there, every building has a basement. Every basement in the path of water in New York City was flooded. It was never designed for a flood, but it is there now. The infrastructure bill, there's 1.2 billion and another 3.5 billion is going to impact all of us. They're just trying to, as Aaron said, shot in the arm, is going to impact all of us, is going to make everybody busy. Just be ready. Impact of technology, I can tell you, retail is gone. Office is going to be maneuvered. We are only going to go to pizza places and eat, and all of our eateries is outside, as Chipotle is designing all of their systems outside eateries. So imagine all of that system, and I'm going to beg Autodesk, think of small firms, please. And just one more item before I let you guys go. 3 kids in college. I went to college. I was a professor, etc. $300 to $500 for books for every semester. Bill Gates went back, literally redid calculus books. You can buy a calculus book for $20 and the actual PDF is free. So that's called democratization. So if you go to a junior college where you're paying only $40 to $100 for an hour of tuition, your books are free. Previously was $300. Your books were more expensive than your tuition. We need to democratize all these softwares. Thank you for all of you, by the way. I learned so much from everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam, for your participation. I can't wait for our next one-on-one conversation together because it's always a mind-boggling experience. So thank you. And Louise, your takeaway, please.
So I think my takeaway is just, seeing all the different components, different sides of, what it is that we do as an industry. The thing, right, for us is we have an owner, they come up to us and say, I want, X, Y, and Z. It's our job as design professionals to give them what they're looking for. Obviously there's a budget, there's everything else that we have to account for. And then it turns over to, the construction team as far as, okay, can you build what I've designed, what the owner wants? And at that point it's working collaboratively, even though, it may not be a design build type of environment or a setting, but it still is something where there's the end goal of providing the owner that's putting in this money, or investors that, are putting it, that have this money that they want to build something. And it's our goal to help, them achieve what it is that they want. And, through the mechanism that we've all addressed today and everything else, I think, obviously, and also what COVID has done for us, I think it's really made us aware as far as the, communication aspect of it, and then how we find different ways to, find what the end goal is. And then the challenging thing now, right, is finding the way that the builders can leverage some of this technology. So, one thing with like 3D printing or, automation, as far as like what Ray's doing with his team and creating more modular systems where it just makes it easier, or just faster, better, that's the goal, right? Is, also going into, how are we doing this sustainably to, to where, as John was mentioning, right, the waste and everything else, how do we leverage all that technology to actually make it better for us, not just in the means of, design, but also, when we turn over, when they're actually utilizing that project. So for me, that was a big takeaway as far as understanding that component of how technology is also ultimately driving sustainability once we're done with the project, and that it's not just solar. So that's a huge impact as far as, what at least I've taken, and I hope other people have taken from this as well.
Thank you, Louise. And you've just given Scott, of course, a strong platform to stand on as he provides us with a wrap up. So Scott, please add to as we begin to gear down this conversation or begin our next. So Scott, please take the floor.
Wow, the honor of doing the wrap up. That's thank you for that. I'd go back to, Sam said something earlier, like, hopefully Autodesk thinks of the little guy, of course. I mean, I mentioned earlier, we're trying to do a multitude of things there to include everybody in the conversation. We have to think of the sole proprietor. As I mentioned, I mentioned AECom. I don't know why they always pop into my head as one of the largest, AE firms in the world at this point. Who else have they acquired recently, right? And just, as far as terms of technology goes, that God, we live in such exciting times because that technology curve just continues to accelerate. One thing that I wanted to say early on, and it may still hit home here, is I'm working towards my 15th year at Autodesk now, which is insane to me. But 15 years in terms of technology. So think back to where we were 15 years ago.
Yep.
My first phone, actually my first couple of mobile phones at Autodesk were BlackBerry devices. Do you know why they were BlackBerry devices? Because the iPhone did not exist yet. Take that for a second. Like the iPhone that, basically half the population seems to have, and the other half the population now seems to have an Android device of any different manufacturer, right? iPhones did not exist. Mobile compute to that kind of power did not exist. Tablets did not exist. Where are we going to be in the next 15 years with this technology? What's the next big thing? Everybody carries a computer that's got, I forget the exact value, but so many hundreds of times more power than the Apollo moon, the moon missions had, right? It's insane. So where are we going to be in the next 15 years? And we have to obviously consider that as we continue to look forward with technology. And it's we talk in terms of BIM, and then from software standpoint in terms of Revit today. In 15 years, it's not Revit. It's the next thing. It's the next Revit or whatever it's going to be called. And those things are already in consideration. They're already being built. And maybe it's not Autodesk. Maybe it's one of our competitors that's doing that. And I think that's what really drives all of us, is that competition that's out there for all of us to strive to do something better, to be better in everything we do in A&E, to be more sustainable, to look into new manufacturing techniques, because we have to meet these needs of our population growth in our society. So I think I'll leave it with that for the moment.
Thanks so much, Scott. Ron is the co-moderator. I just can't wait to hear your takeaway.
Well, I loved listening to and learning from every one of these panelists every year that we do this, and all of the lead up to it. I just learned
better.
It's better and better all the time, and we appreciate every one of you. I don't know whether I'm doing a commercial here for DPR or not, but something that struck me really, really big, 4 words: mission, vision, values, purpose. Something you said, Ray, that really struck a chord with me. So that's a philosophy for living, and a philosophy for doing what you do well, which I know everybody in this panel strives for.
Thank you. I need to make a comment here, and that is that AIAOC is recording this session today. Jeff is going to put this on YouTube. He's going to be providing this symposium to everybody on the planet, and that has access to a computer. And some of the people who are in this conversation today are on the East Coast. Some of them are in Washington, D.C. right now. And I just welcome the exposure that we're able to create and convey. And I welcome the conversation that we collaboratively have been able to generate today. This has just been a pure joy all the way through. A lot of work, a lot of sweat and toil, but it's been a pure joy all the way through. And I agree with you, Ray, that continuing this conversation is paramount in my thinking, and we just want to be able to put legs on that concept. And the real sole purpose of Project Delivery Knowledge Committee is to engage in these conversations and to share with our community the thoughtfulness and the access to the intelligence and the vision of everybody in this room, And so I just celebrate this opportunity, and I celebrate each one of you. And I'm so grateful that you were willing to participate and engage with this conversation today, and to share with us what you individually have experienced on top of 2020, and taking your individual lives and companies into the future. So thank you, one and all.
Thank you for having us. It was great. Thanks for having us be a part of it.
Thank you very much.
Jeff, do you have a wrap up?
I think you guys are awesome.
Jeff can do a rap. Just do a rap. We'll be fine.
Right. Thank you.
I'm trying to turn on my videos. There we go. So it really was an excellent symposium. You know, this is what, Ernest, the third or fourth but pretty much the group that's sitting here, I'm looking around on my screen, have done, and it's very compelling. And I think that it resonates not just with Orange County. This is something and issues that need to be taken up nationwide, and through the AIA, it's such a great platform to do so. You know, the wonderful thing is, and thank you for plugging it, it will be on YouTube. It will be there forever. Anybody can access it. So for all of you that are still here, we still have quite a few people. You know, let people know about this. It's very easy to access. It's free. It's there. And you'll be able to see last year's symposium there as well. So, you know, sit down and enjoy a few hours and learn some great information. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, one and all.
I'm going to beg everybody, please stay safe. A very good contractor friend of mine of 25 years just passed away with COVID 2 weeks ago. A hunky guy, great dancer, great person. Just please, please, please stay safe. Thank you.
Stay safe, everybody. Take care. You all have a good night.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a great evening.
God bless.
Thanks, everyone.